So moving over to the Mughal. Now, the Ottoman Empire was the longest lasting of these Islamic gunpowder empires, lasting about 600 years. The Safavid was the shortest, lasting about 200 years. The Mughal dynasty was in the middle. It was a 300-year-long dynasty. And this dynasty was founded by Babur the Tiger. So Babur the Tiger came into what was formerly the Delhi Sultanate up here and Afghanistan, and he conquered it. So in terms of context, y'all may remember that India was very religiously and ethnically diverse. The Umayyad dynasty had sent Muhammad of Ghazni to go and conquer northern India, which he did, and establish the Delhi Sultanate. Now, when Muhammad of Ghazni went into India, how did he behave? What did he do? How did he treat the natives and their religion? He forced conversions, exactly right. So Muhammad of Ghazni comes in with his military. He destroys Hindu and Buddhist temples. He forces conversions, really not, making Islam very popular in northern India. Okay, but under the Delhi Sultanate, it's going to be predominantly Muslim. But y'all may remember that there were two Hindu brothers, Harihara and Bhuka, who had worked for the Delhi Sultanate until they were sent south to conquer land for the Delhi Sultanate, which they then claimed for themselves, reverted back to Hinduism, and started the kingdom of Vijayanagar. So we see the northern part of India is Islamic. The southern part of India is Hindu. And so this is going to be a big deal when it comes to the Mughal Empire, because the emperor is going to have to balance those interests. He's going to try to reduce those tensions that date all the way back to the Umayyad dynasty. So Babur the Tiger reigned from 1523 until 1530. Not a particularly lengthy reign, but he is historically significant because he is the OG. He is the founder of this empire. Now, how did he legitimize his claim to rule? He claimed that he was a descendant of two other great conquerors, that he was a descendant of Genghis Khan, who y'all may remember as the Mongol leader who made the largest contiguous land empire in all of world history, and Tamerlane, who was of Turkish descent, who came to power after the Mongol Empire. So you have Tamerlane and Genghis Khan. He has that heritage, so he claims that he has the right to rule. So he comes in and invades Afghanistan and the Delhi Sultanate to take it from the Delhi Sultanate and establish his own empire. Now, because he claims that Mongol heritage, he is going to have his empire have a similar claim. Hence, he names it the Mughal dynasty, which is the Persian word for Mongol. So now we know the origin stories for all of the titles or the names of these gunpowder empires. We know that the Mughal Empire comes from the word for Mongol. What about the Ottoman Empire? From Osman Bey. Good. Their founder back in 1299. They're known as the followers of Osman and eventually became known as Ottomans. What about the Safavid Empire? Where do we get their name? Good. Safi al-Din. Safi al-Din was a Sufi mystic who was popular prior to the establishment of the Safavid Empire. And it's from that influence that we see Ismail claim to be the incarnation of Allah with Twelver Shi'ism. So Safavid, Safi al-Din, that's how we get those terms. So now we know the origin story for all of those. Now, Babur the Tiger is going to conquer a lot of territory. He is going to found the Mughal Empire, but it's his grandson who is going to rule over the Mughal Empire at its peak. So we've talked about the peaks of each of these empires. Who was ruling over the Ottoman Empire at its peak? I'll give you a hint. He was magnificent. Good. Suleiman the Magnificent. Who ruled over the Safavid at its peak? Give you a hint. It's an 80s band. Good. Abbas the Great. So we have Suleiman the Magnificent at the height of the Ottoman Empire, Abbas the Great at the height of the Safavid Empire, and now Akbar the Great at the height of the Mughal Empire. Now, as you can see on this PowerPoint, he inherited all of this land within the yellow circle. So that is a lot of territory. The capital of their empire is going to be in Agra. Eventually, it's going to be moved to Delhi under Shah Jahan, which we're going to talk about later in the PowerPoint. But at this time, it's at Agra. Now, once he takes power, he's going to continue to expand his empire. So here in the orange, this is what we see he's added on. So he's about doubled the size of the Mughal empire during his tenure. And he had this drive to conquer because he believed that if we weren't expanding, then we must be in decline. So there must be something wrong with us if we're not continually making our empire bigger and bigger. So we've seen this too with the Inca. When an Incan emperor died, he didn't stop ruling his territory. Instead, the heir would have to go out and conquer territory for themselves if they wanted to rule over anything, because the Incan emperors continued to rule after their deaths. Okay, so similar to this, Akbar is going to instill that into his dynasty, that we constantly need to get bigger if we're going to be an empire. He's also notable for a number of other reasons. He's very, very intelligent and a very capable ruler, but he was illiterate due to suffering from dyslexia. Okay, but he was still able to be a very capable and competent administrator and very intelligent. He just wasn't able to read or write because of that disability. Also, he is going to establish his dominance very early on in his rule. Early on in his rule, he got into a conflict with one of his military generals. And so in response to that disrespect, he picked up the military general and then yeeted him out a window. The official term for that is defenestration. So if you want a $20 word for throwing somebody out the window, defenestration is that word. So he defenestrated this guy. Then he walked down to the courtyard, grabbed the dead guy. He was already dead. Grabbed him by his collar, dragged him back into the house, up the stairs, back to the room, and then tossed him out the window again to just like really drive the point home of don't mess with me. Now, this isn't the only time that we're going to see defenestration play a prominent role in world history. There's two different defenestrations of Prague. One of them involved Catholics and Lutherans, and I think it was the Catholics that got thrown out the window, but they didn't die because they landed in a pile of manure. And so they're like, oh, divine intervention, we were saved by God. And it was like, couldn't make it like a pile of mattresses or something. It had to be a pile of horse manure, but okay. He works in mysterious ways, all of that. So I always love talking about defenestration because it's just a good word. Another factor that's going to lead to Akbar being really great at his job is that he tries to appeal to all members of his empire. He realizes that India is ethnically and religiously diverse, and that if you oppress a certain group of people, especially if that group of people holds a majority population, then your empire might be a rebellion. And so he is going to try to increase the rights of the Hindu population within India in order to reduce those tensions. So y'all may remember that in the Ottoman Empire, there were protected communities that lived in millets, and they were able to maintain their own laws and cultures and traditions. Same thing's going to happen in the Mughal Empire. But in the Ottoman Empire, they charged a jizya. Yes, you can be whatever religion you want as long as you pay taxes to the government. Akbar is going to end that practice in his empire. So whereas previously non-Muslims had to pay the jizya tax, he is going to end that. It's going to make him very popular with the Hindu population. He's also going to end the taxation of pilgrimage routes. Y'all may remember that Muslims take the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, to visit the Kaaba once in their life. It's part of one of the 5 pillars of the faith. In the Hindu religion, there are many gods and many shrines. And so these pilgrimages could be very profitable if you start taxing people on the roads that they need to take to get to those shrines. It's kind of like when you go to Disney World. You drive through Florida, every mile or so, there's a toll booth. So they know that you need to take these roads to get to Disney World. And so they are going to try and get money out of you by taxing you for using that pathway. He's going to end that tax on Hindus. Okay, so this is going to enable the empire to become stronger through this religious tolerance. And he's going to be tolerant of all faiths within India, whether they're Christians, Muslim, Zoroastrianists, the Jewish population, or Hindus. So he is very progressive in that sense. Now, he does try to go a little bit further with it. He tries to become so religiously tolerant that he creates his own religion. He's like, I'm going to brand this, my religion. And it's called the divine faith. And this divine faith wasn't anything original. It's more so just a syncretic religion. He was like, hey, India is super religiously diverse. What if we took all the religions, shook them up, and then created something new? So he's going to create the divine faith, which is also known as the Din-e-Lahi. Now, in creating this divine faith, he's not going to be very successful. As you can see from the mix of religions there, you have polytheistic and monotheistic religions combining together. They're not even the same monotheistic religions. Like the Jewish people, Muslims, and Christians all worship the same God, but the Zoroastrianists worship Ahura Mazda. So even though they're all monotheistic, they're too different to combine them all together. But he is going to attempt cultural syncretism with this religion in order to reduce tensions and raise his status as the ruler of India. Now, what are some other examples of syncretism that we've discussed in this class before? Not necessarily religious, but just syncretism in general. Remember, syncretism is when you take two aspects of culture and combine them to create something new. It could be a new religion, it can be a new building, it can be a new language. Good. Syncretism of Hagia Sophia and St. Basil's Cathedral, with a combination of Islamic influences in terms of geometric patterns and colors, but also Roman influence with domes and columns and arches. What about syncretic languages? Do we have any examples of those? Good, Mahan. The Swahili language, which is a combination of what? Arabic and Bantu. Exactly right. Creole as a language is a combination of African languages and European languages like French. Vodun is a religion. It's a combination of Bantu religion and Catholicism. Okay, so we've talked about syncretism before. Syncretism is different from diffusion. Whereas syncretism is combining to create something new, diffusion is just moving from point A to point B. So if Islam spreads from the Arabian Peninsula into India and it's exactly the same, then that's just diffusion as opposed to syncretism. Good. So what you need to know about this divine faith is that it failed. He tried, but he's not going to get a lot of supporters or followers in this religion. They've already, got their own. So he wanted to reduce the religious tensions. He wanted to be a common ruler for all the religious and social and ethnic diversity within his empire, but he is going to fall short on that. Now, in addition to religious reforms, he's also going to institute some social reforms. He attempts to try and stop child marriages in India, and he also tries to stop the practice of sati. Now, does anybody know what sati is? Has anyone heard of it before? Okay, not many people have. In India, when a man died, they would burn his body, like cremation. So they would build a funeral pyre. And so the body would be put on this funeral pyre to be cremated. Now, sati is the practice of the widow of that man killing herself at the funeral. So throwing herself into the fire with her dead husband. Now, obviously, that's a little bit problematic. Not really great for women's rights that if their husband dies, they have to throw themselves into the fire because they have no value to society anymore without a husband. Like, clearly that's very problematic. And so he is going to ban this practice. So socially increasing the rights of women in his empire. Did a pretty good job at administering. But his successors are going to mess that up for him, particularly Aurangzeb, when Aurangzeb takes away that religious toleration. Politically, he is going to try to increase representation in his government for the Hindu population. Y'all may remember in the Ottoman and Safavid Empire, all the positions of power were held by Muslims. The Sultan was a Muslim, the Vizier was a Muslim. So all the positions of power in government were held by Muslims. In the Mughal Empire, yes, the emperor is going to be Muslim, but there is going to be more social mobility for the Hindu population in this empire. He's going to pick Hindu leaders to serve in his government, and these leaders are going to be known as Rajas or chiefs, and he's going to allow the Hindu population to be exempt from Sharia law. Because remember, what is Sharia law? Good. They're Islamic laws. This is Islamic jurisprudence that deals with almost all aspects of life. So the Hindu population is going to be a protected people. They don't have to follow Sharia law because it's Islamic law. So he's allowing for them to practice their own beliefs. He's also going to show his connection to the Hindu population by not only marrying Muslim wives, but also marrying Hindu wives. So to show that he is representative of the whole of India, rather than just the Muslim population. So he builds a strong and centralized government with an effective civil service. He reduces tensions amongst the population, increases equality and social mobility. So overall, pretty solid ruler. Now, y'all may remember that in talking about the Muslim gunpowder empires, each empire has a slave infantry. So they capture people to fight in their wars and to protect their leaders. In the Ottoman Empire, what did we call that slave infantry? Who were those military elite? Remember, they came from the Devshirme system. Good, they were Janissaries. So Janissaries were the military elite within the Devshirme system, boys from ages 8 to 20 who had been captured and converted to Islam and raised for that specific purpose. Eventually, they overthrew the Sultanate because they were outfitted with gun weaponry and wanted to end the Devshirme system. In the Safavid Empire, what was the name of their slave infantry? Ghulams, exactly right. So you have the Janissaries in the Ottoman Empire and the Ghulams in the Safavid Empire. But the Safavid Empire got them from Russia rather than the Balkans. In the Mughal Empire, they're going to call their slave infantry the Chelas. But they're not going to be as well known for their slave infantry. Whereas with the Ottomans, we talk over and over about the Janissaries, like it's one of those key terms that you need to know for the AP exam. Never seen Chelas or even Ghulams mentioned in the AP exam. But they are notable because if you're trying to do comparison and you're trying to give specific factual information, it helps to be able to say specifically the Ottomans had Janissaries from the Balkans, and specifically, the Safavid had Ghulams from Russia. And so using those ID terms that we use is helpful in scoring the points for the SAQ. Now, if you get those mixed up and you're like, oh, well, the Janissaries had Chelas and the Safavid had Janissaries, then it's specific, but it's not factual. So you got to make sure that you keep those terms in line. Kind of like if you said, oh, Suleiman was a Shah. Well, no, he was a Sultan. Now, in particular, eunuchs are going to be valued as slaves within these empires. Does anyone know what eunuch means? Many of y'all have pets. Have you ever gotten them spayed or neutered? It's like that for humans. So these are typically men who have been castrated. These are particularly going to be used in the Ottoman Empire to guard the Sultan's harem. Because remember, in the Ottoman Empire, the wife or the girlfriend, any of the women in the harem could produce the next heir. And so they needed to make sure that all of those children were the Sultan's. So oftentimes, eunuch soldiers would be put in charge of defending the harems because they physically could not father any children. So this is another part of that SFI where you can fall into that comparison. Now, if you're given a SAQ and it says compare and contrast the empires, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to talk about their slave infantry. You could talk about their religions. You could talk about their government. You could talk about their access to trade. Now, within the Mughal dynasty, the zamindari system is going to be comprised of zamindars or local leaders, local bureaucrats who are charged with reporting back to the emperor. So they control these areas, these territories, collecting taxes, supervising construction, enforcing the laws, maintaining the water supply, all of those government things that bureaucrats do. But even though they're in charge of that territory, they are subordinate to the emperor. So they report back to the emperor. This is a centralized government. So what do they get out of it? What do you get from being a zamindar? Well, you get land. Now remember, land is a form of wealth. Okay, now you may think, okay, but just land? You still need income coming in every year. So the zamindars, they were supposed to collect taxes, but they're allowed to keep some of those taxes for themselves. So taxes around that time were about 1/3 of production, which is similar to what we have today. Like 30% of my paycheck is taken out. They take taxes out of it before I get it. Okay, so 30% is pretty common. Now, unfortunately, eventually these zamindars are going to become corrupt. They're going to start keeping more and more money for themselves instead of sending it back to the government. And they're going to use that money to form their own personal armies. So here again, we see yet another historical continuity. the constant power struggle between the landed class, the wealthy, and the autocratic ruler. We saw it in France with the nobles versus Louis XIV. We're seeing it here with the zamindars versus the emperor of the Mughal dynasty. So that's going to be problematic to the authority of the Mughal empire because the nobles are going to increase in their authority, decreasing the tax revenue that's available to the government. Now, all of this was under Akbar the Great. Okay, remember that we talked about the different leaders of each of these empires when they hit their peak. The Mughal dynasty hits its peak under Akbar the Great. But they also had another particularly competent leader by the name of Jahan. Like Akbar the Great, Jahan is going to believe in rapidly expanding the empire. Remember that Akbar said, if you're not expanding, then you're declining. He is going to extend the Mughal Empire into the southern part of India by conquering the Deccan Plateau. Y'all may remember that the northern part of India was predominantly what religion? Good, Muslims. Okay, it was the Islamic faith that was dominant in the north. This is a Muslim empire. In the southern part of India, however, we see what religion dominating? Hinduism. Good, Mahan. So we have Hinduism and Islam. So, very religiously and ethnically diverse. It is important that the Mughal dynasty maintain its religious tolerance. Jahan is going to maintain that religious toleration. However, you also have Europeans who are very, very interested in India. Now, why would Europeans like the Portuguese be interested in conquering territory as far away as India? What could they benefit from? Good, trading. Okay, trading with the spice trade, the Indian Ocean lanes. Remember that as we move from period 1 into period 2, land-based trade like the Silk Road is no longer the big thing. They're moving over into maritime trade because the Silk Road was controlled by the Ottomans, and so the Europeans wanted another way to get those spices. So what was the first country that attempted to find a maritime route to India? Portugal. Good. They were the first European country to attempt to get to India. Prince Henry the Navigator started his school for navigation. That improved cartography. It improved maps. They took all that technology from China, like lateen sails, and used it to build caravels. Then Bartholomew Diaz got halfway around the tip of Africa before he had to turn back. Which Portuguese explorer made it all the way around Africa? Vasco da Gama. Good. So Vasco da Gama made it all the way to India and then came back with spices, and Portugal began its age of exploration. Then Spain's going to try the same thing by going west. They don't actually make it to India, though. So Portugal, by this time in the 1600s, is no longer in its golden age. France and England have really risen to status in Europe during this time, but they're still trying to hold on to their monopoly in India. So they're trying to hold on to that Indian Ocean trade, hence why they invade Bengal. But they are going to be defeated by Jahan. So he is a particularly adept military leader. And in order to show off his competence and his power and his wealth, he is going to build architecture. Now, this particular architecture doesn't legitimize his rule through religion because it's not religious. It's a palace and a throne. But it does legitimize his rule because it shows off his power and wealth. We've seen rulers do this before. Louis XIV built the Palace of Versailles to awe and inspire and to show off his power as an absolute ruler. Peter the Great is going to do the same thing with Peterhof or the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, showing off how strong and powerful and wealthy you are. He's also going to move the capital. So Jahan moves the capital from Agra to Delhi, which is still in northern India, so still in the middle of the majority Muslim population. And he is going to build a fancy palace known as the Red Fort. Within this Red Fort, he is going to build the Peacock Throne. Oh, also note that over here where it says R, 1628 to 1658, that means Jahan's reign. So he ruled from 1628 until 1658. Some students get that confused with, oh, he must have died during that time. Like, no, it's different. He's also going to show off his ties to the Muslim religion and his power and wealth through the building of monumental architecture. So this is legitimizing his power, both through religion and wealth. Okay, so with this, he builds the Taj Mahal in memory of his wife, Mumtaz Mahal. It took 18 years to build, over 20,000 workers, and it was made entirely out of white marble. He did plan to make an exact copy of this Taj Mahal in black marble for himself, but he was unable to do so, probably because his own son put him in prison. But we're going to talk about that in a minute. So here we see the influence of women in politics in the Mughal Empire. We've seen this in the Ottoman Empire. In the Ottoman Empire, women played a political and social role at court through harem politics and promoting their own children to be heirs to the throne. In the Mughal Empire, we even have a woman who ends up ruling the empire. The Mughal Empire, Jahangir, so it's Jahan and then G-I-R, okay, he ruled from 1605 until 1627, so he predated Shah Jahan, and he is going to allow his wife to rule as the de facto ruler. She is the one in charge of the government, his wife being Nur Jahan. So we see the influence of women in politics in the Ottoman Empire and the Mughal Empire, but not so much in the Safavid Empire. Here are some pictures of the Taj Mahal itself, and interestingly, we can see some cultural syncretism. Now, there's a difference between syncretism and diffusion. What is that difference? What is cultural diffusion versus cultural syncretism? Aspects of one culture being introduced to another. So as Arabic spread through Africa, that's diffusion, if it hasn't changed at all. Now, cultural syncretism, that is the combination of two aspects of culture, which is different from diffusion, which is just the movement of one culture. So same thing that we see here in the Taj Mahal. This is a brand new building that takes aspects of other features of architecture in order to create something new. What are some examples of syncretism in architecture in this monument? Where do domes come from? Okay, so we see the influence of the West in the Taj Mahal. You also have minarets, okay, these towers for the call to prayer. So you're combining something from Western Europe with something from the Middle East to create this mosque. You also see geometric patterns. There aren't icons. There aren't pictures of people. More so the patterning of the lattice on the Taj Mahal that is decoration for this infrastructure. So all of that is examples of cultural syncretism. Now, this is a really fancy mosque/mausoleum. It is very expensive to create. I mean, it took 18 years. That's kind of like with the Palace of Versailles. It took 30 years in order to create that, and it cost a lot of money. And the government is paying for this tomb, for this mosque. Now, there are three ways that a government can make money, and they all start with the letter T. Okay, how does a government make money? Taxes, trade, good Elizabeth, and then they could demand stuff from other countries. Tribute, exactly right. So you have taxes, trade, and tribute. The government is spending a lot of its money on military expansion under Jahan, because remember, he and Akbar the Great believed that if the empire was not expanding, then it was declining. So they're spending their money on the military, and they're spending their money on monumental architecture. That means that the government is going to have to raise taxes. So under Shah Jahan, we are going to see the expansion of taxation go from 1/3 of production, or 33%, to 1/2 of production, or 50%. That is a pretty big jump. Half of everything you make goes to the government. And how do people tend to react when their taxes get raised? Yeah, no, they respond with rebellion, with revolt. So tensions are going to increase due to the increase in taxation. Don't y'all just love the camel's face? It's like, I can't tell if that's his tongue or he just like ate someone's hat. I want to pretend it's a hat. After Jahan's rule, things are going to get very, very bad for the Mughal dynasty. Jahan had a son named Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb is going to take power, imprison his father, and he is going to kill all of his brothers. Okay, why would he kill all of his brothers? To get rid of any competition. Good, TJ. Same thing happened in the Ottoman Empire. Y'all may remember Mehmed the Conqueror of the Ottoman Empire made it legal for the Sultan to kill all of his brothers to eliminate competition for the throne once they took the throne. Now, why was Mehmed the Conqueror known as Mehmed the Conqueror? What did he conquer? And don't say land. Someone said that second period, and I was like, yeah, technically you're right. He did conquer land. But what land specifically? Constantinople, which was the capital of what empire? The Byzantine Empire, exactly right. So in 1453, the Ottoman Turks conquered Constantinople, and they renamed it what? Istanbul, exactly right. Okay, so Mehmed II killed all of his brothers in the Ottoman Empire. Now we see the same thing happening in the Mughal Empire under Aurangzeb. So he comes to power. He reigns from 1659 until 1707, and he is going to undermine the Mughal Empire. How he does this is that he is going to end the policy of religious toleration that began all the way back under Akbar the Great. Now, why would ending religious toleration in India be a bad move? India was very diverse. It was ethnically diverse, and it was religiously diverse. And what do people tend to do when they're being oppressed? They tend to revolt. They tend to rebel. And so the majority Hindu population, particularly in the southern half of the empire, they are not going to be too happy with Aurangzeb. So what does he do to tick them off? Well, he goes in and he destroys Hindu temples. And then on those holy lands, he builds up Muslim mosques. So that's going to be a slap in the face to the Hindu population. This isn't even the first time that a Muslim ruler has come in, conquered, destroyed Hindu temples, and built mosques there instead. Who else in India's history came in and conquered the Delhi Sultanate and forced conversions? Muhammad of Ghazni. Good. Okay, so same thing is happening with Aurangzeb. He is not religiously tolerant. He is going to change the religious tolerance policy of the empire under his rule. He's also going to reinstitute the jizya tax. Y'all may remember that Akbar the Great ended the jizya, and Aurangzeb is going to re-implement it. The jizya is a tax on non-Muslims, so he's going to increase their tax rate in addition to the 50% taxes that they already had to pay because of Jahan spending. Music is going to be banned as iconoclastic, as disrespectful too, because of its iconic nature. And this is only going to serve to deepen the religious tensions that were already brewing dating back to the 700s with the founding of the Delhi Sultanate in the northern half of India. So you have internal revolution, internal strife. That makes you more susceptible to attacks from the outside. And at this point in time, the Europeans are very, very interested in colonizing. Y'all may remember that the New World had been colonized in old imperialism, but now old imperialism is over. You've had all these independence movements that have been started by the Enlightenment. Okay, so the New World is now newly independent from their European mother countries. But these European countries are going through the Industrial Revolution, which means they need cash crops. In particular, they need cotton, because in the Industrial Revolution, they have built textile factories. Now, what are textiles? Cloth. Okay, so these are going to be clothing factories. They need the raw material of cotton in order to create the manufactured material of clothing. And so which European country during the 19th century is going to come in and colonize India? Great Britain. Britain is going to come in and start colonizing India for cotton. And then by 1857, we're going to see the final demise of the Mughal dynasty, with the British government establishing their own government within India. In addition to growing cotton as a cash crop, the British are also going to use India to grow opium, which is a drug. And they're going to start dealing that drug to China. Okay, they're going to try to force China to take this opium and become addicted to it so that they can get money off of that trade. China is going to refuse and burn the opium on their shores, and that's going to lead to the Opium Wars between Britain and China. So we're going to talk about that as we move into period 3.